Good evening, everyone. It is Monday, November 25th, 2024 at 5:30 PM. I'd like to call the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union Board of Directors to order. First up on the agenda are public comments. Nobody in the room. Nobody online. No. Board members and administrators. No. Past public comments and into finance. So there's two action items in finance this evening. Internal control document. It's item A. Item B is central office lease extension. For item A, internal control document.
This is basically a checklist that we're required by statute to provide to the SU board annually. Pretty much the same answers every year. However, from what got posted, even though it was correct, I wanted to make an adjustment just so everybody is aware. It's actually on the second page. Have there been any changes in authorized signatures during the fiscal year? Now, while it's not within this fiscal year, it happened back in March. Arlington School District has a new treasurer. So I did update that on this document, which we will re-upload, but I did it after Amy left today. And then the only other difference from previous year's versions is that I also added the SVSU workshop for the school board members having financial trainings. So it's, it's out there. The recording's out there if anybody cares to watch it. So other than that, everything is the same as it has been year after year. And essentially what will happen is all the chair has to do is recognize that he's received this, you sign it, and then it goes out to the other boards just as an FYI.
So the board needs to move it.
Note that it has been delivered to you. And it's I'm the one who's saying that this is the way that it is, so it's
I'll make the motion that we accept.
So we have a motion from Ray. Do we have a second? Or do we have a second?
Second. Are we having discussion?
Thank you. Yes.
Any discussion?
Just one question, Renee, on have the school board members attended the financial trainings? Shouldn't it say yes and instead of I don't know?
I don't know because I don't know who has been to VSBA trainings or
Oh,
VSA
yes.
trainings.
I thought it's just because it said SVSU workshop.
Yeah, but that one I offered, so those are kind of like my notes that they're offered through those other venues, but I can't attest to whether or not they've been attended. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Oh, yeah.
With respect to that, the local workshop that Renee presented, that was available on Zoom afterwards, and I viewed it today. It's useful.
Thank you for taking the hour to watch it.
I watched it too, but I fast forwarded through some of the sections. Wasn't quite an hour.
Hey, no skipping.
Right. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Okay, item B under finance is central office lease extension.
Renee also.
Yeah.
Renee and I met with the landlord and
Hard to believe that we're coming up on the end of our first 3-year term in this space. So that'll be on June 30th. So in our original lease agreement, we have the option to extend the lease for 2 additional 3-year terms. So that's what we would like to do as of July 1. The landlord asked about a rent adjustment. I looked at it and countered with a lower amount, which is what has been presented or is in the budget this evening. Essentially going up $1,500 a month, so $18,000 for the year. And I arrived at that number using the consumer price index of what the increases have been in all urban areas over the last 3 years, and they agreed to that. They also added an option for us if we would like to, anytime within this next 3-year term, if we wanted to expand up to another 1,000 square feet within the same area, some way or shape or form here, because we have found that we do need some more meeting space on occasion. They will give us that additional square footage at no increase in rent, so essentially lowering what our per square foot cost is. We would just have to bear the cost of any improvements to that space if we were to do that. No plan to do it at this point, but it's just an option.
There are days that we're squeezed for meeting space here.
Yeah.
It's something that I believe is needed, but because it's not budgeted, because as Renee said, it would be the raw space that then we would have to develop, which is different than how this space was developed. It was part of it, built into our lease agreement, the cost, so we did not have to upfront the build out of this space.
On the interior, who maintains the upkeep of the interior of the building itself? I don't know.
We're responsible for cleaning, but
Paint or,
they would be okay with us making any improvements, but regular maintenance, like if, there's leaky spots, we just let them know and they come in and they take care of trash, they take care of pest control. We have heating, cooling issues. Landlord.
quality is what?
So you're looking for a motion to approve the lease extension with the new terms.
Yeah, so it'd be 1825 a square foot is what it would be going to. So for the 8,000 square feet, which comes to $148,000 a year, up from 126. We're currently at $16 a square foot.
Do we have a motion to approve the central office lease extension, the terms that Renee outlined as part of the presentation?
I'll make the motion to approve the,
We have a motion by Jeff. Do we have a second?
Also,
Any discussion? Further discussion?
Renee, over the next 3 years, it'll maintain that same amount every year for the next 3 years.
Fixed for the next 3 years, and then if we decide to go beyond that for the next 3-year term, we will use that CPI index again for any adjustment and then negotiate if necessary.
So there's a chance that we could get to the end of the following 3-year cycle and have the landlord say at that point, we have a different tenant we want to have in there. Is that right?
They could, they have to give us so much notice. I haven't actually reviewed the full lease. We would just be doing this extension by probably a 1-page addendum identifying the possible space expansion and the cost. I think they also proposed language, which I think is in our original lease too, that we know that we hinder on budgets passing every year. So that would be a reopener if we needed to make budget cuts. They would be willing to come back and
As a reminder, they wanted a 10-year lease with us when we first, but we're prohibited by law from leasing that long. That's why it was broken down as 3 years with 2 3-year renewals, which got it close to the 10.
so no, they're happy to have us at this point anyway.
so we don't have a right of first refusal.
I don't think it's written that way.
I'm just thinking about the burden of an expense if we were to say we need additional space, build out that additional space, and then get to the end of 6 years from now, I suppose. And have done all that work and be told that we can't remain in this space. Probably not a deal breaker, but
My sense is that we are a good tenant. They want to keep us. I think that's why they came back with offering the additional square footage at no additional cost to maybe even incentivize us to deepen our roots here in this building.
Sandy.
Does parking cause any type of an issue now, let alone if you did consider an expansion in the future?
Expansion wouldn't put more people in here, so it would just create more meeting space. We haven't had issues with parking other than people, there's plenty of parking. You just might have to park one lot over and walk over. So we have not, if they ever build in this lot over here, maybe we will, which has been proposed. That might, that tends to be our overflow park, but
On the grassy area.
there are some people who might like to park closer to the building, but there is plenty of parking within a short walk.
Multiple municipal lots within a block too, that aren't necessarily right here, but there are lots both directions that are free parking.
All right, so we have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Do we have any abstentions? Okay, item 3 on the agenda is our consent agenda. Within that are minutes, warrants, leave of absence, retirements, resignations, and nominations. There's nobody opposed. I request that we move those as a group. So moved. Okay, so we have a motion by Glenn and a second by Ray. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, item 4 on the agenda, policies. Section A, under policies is number 1090, use of school facilities. That's policy that we need to warn. We have a motion to warn it as was in the packet.
A motion to warn.
Motion by Sandy.
I'll second.
Second by Glenn. Any discussion?
Scott, what's the proper process for getting feedback to the policy committee if there were, once it's been warned?
Probably right now. As part of the discussion, yes?
Is there feedback for this policy?
No, when it's presented at the local boards, I've just asked our local board to provide any comments or questions to me that I can then bring back to the policy committee. So I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on the right way to go about doing that.
Well, Glenn and Sandy are both on the policy, and Katie are, we have 3 policy committee members, so.
But Leon,
Great.
and you have a meeting December
Monday.
2nd.
Second.
A week from today.
Yeah.
Okay, number 1090, use of school facilities. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, section B, under policies, number 5156, student nutrition and wellness. Do we have a motion to warn that as was presented in the packet?
So moved.
Motion made by Glenn,
Second.
seconded by Sandy. Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the big one. Number 5, SVSU 4-year, it should be 26, it's written 25 on the agenda, 4-year 26 budget review. Renee, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Going to try to share my screen and
Actually, for clarity here, the action requested will be that we.
probably just at our next meeting. Yeah.
The goal is to have the SU budget done, before December, end of December.
Yeah.
So that we have real numbers bring to everybody else's budget, but typically we do 2, if not 3 budget meetings for each board. Renee has already have scheduled all through January, which
I've penciled them out on a calendar, just seeing what's gonna work for everybody. Okay, so as is with typical, I have put a packet together for you. So the first way we'll look at the budget is by category. And associated with these numbers are the next 2 pages of the packet. Pages 2 and 3 are the narrative that are associated. So just giving you the highlights as to what's making up the differences there. We will also quickly look at the budget by department or function, which is the next 2 pages in the packet, pages 4 and 5. There is a 4-page narrative that's associated with that. So kind of looking at things side by side might be helpful. Page 10 of the packet is the list of acronyms. That's just there for reference. Pages 11 through 17 are a combination of the function and category budget. So it's giving some more detail without giving you the over 3,000 lines of individual budget detail.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Trying to save trees. And then there's some new information at the end of the packet that I want to, we'll go over and I'll pull up on the screen. It's about staffing and then some grouping of costs and the budget. So a lot to get through. Okay, so we know that the greatest cost factors, drivers that we have in our budget are staffing. So we have collective bargaining agreements for the SU exclusive of Arlington that have been negotiated for FY26. So we know what the salary increases are going to be for those folks and for those positions. So those have been factored into the budget that you have before you, this first draft. I also have projected adjustments for the employees that are part of the Arlington School District collective bargaining agreement. Those would be the special education staff. Because this is just the SU portion here. And then any a possible projected increase for non-unionized staff. So all that's factored in for the existing positions. A couple of changes. I think it was back in September, maybe Megan brought before the board the request for an additional paraprofessional. So I have included that in the budget. I believe on the consent agenda, position was just filled. It's not on there. The non-form just came through recently. Along with that, Student Services is asking for 3 new registered behavior technician positions. There are, I think, more than a dozen students projected having autism spectrum disorder coming in as kindergartners. The NEC classrooms, New England Center for Children classrooms, I think are full. And each of those students already has a one-on-one para, so they're trying to figure out how they're going to accommodate population and their needs. So Kate asked me to add 3 of those positions there. And then kind of in that same vein, 2 board certified behavior analysts, which actually are currently on staff, but just pulling them into local funding for next year to hopefully free up some grant funding if we can actually expand on our board certified behavior analysts, because they are in great demand and their caseloads are too heavy to be able to get to all the students that they currently are being requested to see. Also in this budget, we have, and I'm sorry, I'm not scrolling here as I should. Those were the requests that I just went over. Also, in the salary lines, we transitioned a vacant special educator position this year for a new student services associate director who is serving Molly Stark. And we've also started to transition some positions out of some of our federal funding, pulling it into local, mainly because of the Visters impact. Visters is the Vermont State Teacher Retirement System. And a couple of years ago, to then kind of bolster up the money that's going into the retirement system, they started tacking an assessment on to our federal funding. So any educator that is licensed, that is being paid out of a federal grant, right off the top, we have to pay 25.64% of their salary to Visters. So that's taking a huge chunk out of the available funding that we have out of those grants. That's just going into teacher retirement. So if we pull those folks into local and then push other positions into the grants that aren't part of the teacher retirement system, we're going to get more bang for our buck. So what we've done is we pulled, as we'll see as we get a little bit further into this, so we pulled school psychs out, and I've put occupational therapists in. I'm pulling SLPs out, and we're putting a para in, or behaviorists in. So just anybody that is associated with teacher retirement, also our directors, associate directors. So getting them out, and again, just pushing other positions into the grants, kind of one for one, dollar for dollar, essentially, but just so we're not having that 25.64% hit, trying to stretch the money that we have. Yep, so the OTs, the paras, the behavior supports, I have a couple of those positions that are coming out of the local budgets, but then we pulled the school psychs, SLPs, and other directors, associate directors, and the adaptive PE teacher in. Same thing, but at a slighter scale with our consolidated federal program, which funds a portion of both our assistant superintendent and the director of early education. So just ticking up the local funding for those positions. Again, to get away from the Visters hit, but also with the change in administration at the federal level, we don't know what our awards are going to be going forward. So to be able to secure those positions, sliding them into local. So for the assistant superintendent position, I just ticked that up by a 0.1 FTE. And the director of student services was a 0.03. So essentially she would be funded at a 0.2 out of the grant. And 0.4 would be funding the assistant superintendent position. So, and then associated with all those salaries are the benefits. So VHI has presented its proposed rates for next year to the Department of Financial Regulation at the state. And they are not as bad as they were last year, but we're still looking at significant double-digit increases. So 11.9%. On the gold CDHP and silver CDHP plan is the basis. This is negotiated at the state level. And they basically tell us what, as the employer, we contribute towards those plans. So the premium's going up 11.9%. We will continue to see that decrease of 1% on the employer side, or increase on the employee side for support staff. Folks in Arlington, I think, will be there as of January 1. So the cost share is 80/20. Down here, the SVSU, I think, will hit that mark on January 1 of 2026. So factoring that into the budget as well. Factoring in possible benefits from the proposed positions. The Vermont Municipal Employees Retirement System will have a 0.25% increase for July 1. So that has been factored in. And then another hit to our local funds supporting the Vermont State Teacher Retirement System is any new educator, any new person to teacher retirement on or after July 1 of 2015, the employer, and this goes not just for the SU, but all member districts as well, pays an assessment flat fee per year per person in that bucket. This year it was $1,542 per teacher. It usually goes up roughly $100, so I factored that in to the best of my knowledge of who those folks are. And then, of course, if we have any vacancies at this time, we assume that somebody coming in isn't going to have all of that experience to not be subject to that assessment. And VHI dental rates are flat for next year. And then the other thing you're seeing that's driving the increase on the benefit line, not doing a good job with that, is for professional development. And this is in the curriculum budget with the incorporation, or I should say the expansion of the SU to incorporate the Arlington and Sandgate school districts. We are seeing an uptick in folks that are accessing the professional development opportunities, which are provided through their contracts. So I just want to make sure we have funding enough to sustain that. So increase that at the request of the Assistant Superintendent and Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment. So before I get off onto the next grouping, are there questions about what has been asked of for the new positions or any of the benefits that are? Stop sharing for a minute in case anybody's.
I kind of missed which direction this adjustment for transitions of positions between local and federal funds go. They're transitioning from local to federal.
They're going both ways. So anybody, I'm trying to get anybody that's part of teacher retirement out and anybody that's not part of teacher retirement in. So if I can reduce salaries that are subject to teacher retirement, I'm essentially saving that 25.64%. So our occupational therapists, our physical therapists, behaviorists, none of those folks are licensed with the Agency of Education, so they're not part of teacher retirement, they're part of municipal retirement. And at least at this point, municipal retirement hasn't hit our federal grants.
So you put them into federal funds.
Mhm.
Any other questions with regard to the salaries and benefits section?
I want to wait till you get completed before I start quizzing.
So next line we have is contracted services. So New England Center for Children classrooms and the affiliated supports really do make up a good portion of the number that you're seeing there. Each of the classrooms is roughly, give or take, $200,000, anticipating probably a 5% increase on that. We are looking to have 2 of the elementary classrooms considered what are cooperative classrooms, where we are providing the teacher, but they are providing the behavior support. So that saves about $50,000, but it's still $150,000 plus the increase factor. The 2 classrooms at the middle school, Mount Anthony, and 2 classrooms at Mount Anthony High School are the full, where they're providing the teacher and the behavior supports. We do, if any of those folks that watched the workshop, we do track the costs and allocate those costs of the classrooms by student. If there's transportation associated with any of those students, most of them have a one-on-one para. Some of them may have progressed to a point where they're sharing a para. So we allocate all of those costs So in the event we get to that extraordinary threshold, which is just over $67,000 for next year, we'll get reimbursed 95% of that cost in excess. So we're just starting to do that now. The auditors were here last week, so we're working on fund balances. We'll start projecting those revenue sources. So hopefully we'll have our assessments, first draft of assessments to look at our next meeting. We also are projecting increases for our United Counseling clinicians. We have one at Fisher, 3 serving SVU ESD schools, and 1 serving the Mount Anthony schools. Small increases that we are aware of for EdDoc Vermont, which is the software that we use for IEP documentation, School Spring, Time Clock Plus, items of that nature. And then the audit, unfortunately, like when we got our engagement letter, it was well past budget season. So it was a pretty significant jump in what they presented to us. We did do some outreach to see if there are other firms would be interested in looking at us. No takers at this point, but we will continue to look. So we're, as in many situations, kind of end up with what we have. Although the team that came down, it was great. The process has been tightened up, and we're looking to have financials hopefully January, which will be significantly sooner than what it has been the past couple of years.
What sort of an increase, say a percentage? How much of an increase was it, percentage-wise?
We are,
Or however you want to tell me.
it was different by district.
Yeah.
But I think we can actually see it on, when we look at it broken down by function, it's 14.
Okay.
14.5%. So those are contracted services, and then operations have a little disclaimer as to what this grouping includes: utilities, insurance, repairs, maintenance, rent, travel reimbursements, advertising, printing, things of that nature. So just minor increases that we're projecting there. Next 2 lines down are our transportation. So our contracted transportation with Dufour. We know what that cost is, so I've factored that in. And tuition. So tuition line is encompassing a couple of things. So our pre-K tuition, that usually goes up about $100 a year per student. We have not gotten the list of factors that are impacted by the New England Economic Price Index that comes from the Agency of Education. But the finance director, who replaced Brad James, left the agency a couple weeks ago. So they have a vacancy of a very important position, which brings a lot of data to my position. So I'm hoping that they're going to be able to fill that quickly, or have somebody there to start pumping this information down to us. So, but along with the increase in the tuition, Megan has been looking at the birth rates and her enrollment rates. So she's actually pulled back and decreasing the number of seats that we're budgeting for pre-K. And then we also have adjustments for the number of students and that we have attending out of district placements. We're trying to serve as many kids as we can in-house now. Have the therapeutic setting, Beach Street, Congress Street. So hopefully keeping those numbers down, keeping the students here. Next 2 lines, we have supplies and equipment. The supply line has gone up in, for me, recategorizing some of what was previously in a contracted service line. it's just a more accurate representation. So you can see our contracted service has decreased by about $54,000. And supplies increasing by 58. So just getting the essentially the money into the right bucket so we don't have to move it and do budget transfers once the fiscal year starts. But no significant changes, increases, just the typical 3 to 5% that you might see for, some of our softwares. Equipment's level funded, and then we're projecting just some minor adjustments to minor increases to the membership dues and fees. So I'm happy to jump over into the by function. I don't, necessarily need to go through it line by line as I did with that. There's not a whole lot of new asks this year. It's, again, the cost drivers are really being the existing staffing that we have with the collective bargaining agreement that's in place. And the projected increases to the health insurance are pretty significant. What is your pleasure? Would you like me to take a run through the budgets? Again, it's same budget, just broken down by function. So essentially all of those budget categories that we just looked at are condensed into individual lines. So 1101, your direct instruction, includes our local paraprofessionals. It would be our English language learners, instructors, and then our pre-K. The 1201 special education is all of the special education teachers and special education paras. Any contracted services, the tuition, everything gets condensed into that line there.
I'll ask a quick question, Renee. It's Jeff.
Sure.
For the teacher retirement, do you have to pay teacher retirements on, the teachers who are in like emergency position or in a temporary position, like they don't have a license to the state? Do we still pay retirement on those individuals?
Yes, if they are a licensed educator, regardless of whether it's an emergency, provisional, or professional, if they did not or have not been a member of that retirement system as of July 1 of 15, we will have that assessment. So that flat $1,600.
And
Besides
that's
that,
and if they retire, if they decide not to teach after 2 years, they can take that money with them, correct?
it's there. I don't know how accessible it is.
Yeah. Okay.
But as an employer,
Only their contribution, but not the employer's contribution they can't collect.
we don't contribute to teacher retirement as an employer benefit. Unlike
Oh, so they
Beavers.
okay,
So
got it.
with the municipal retirement, we are required to contribute
Okay,
5.5. It'll be 5 3/4% but there's not a match. It's the teachers are actually, it's coming out of their pay directly.
okay,
But there's no match for the employer side for Visters.
okay. Just clarifying, because I thought at one point they said that, when we hire somebody new, we had to put money down right away.
No, it's for new, I think you're referring to new teachers,
You need to, yeah.
change in the law. for-
Okay, so that's an old law then. Okay, then I'm all set.
Just that assessment. Yeah.
Okay,
And that
Thank
just
you.
happens, that gets billed once a year, so it's not like but they do, like if we had somebody start mid-year, they catch them and they'll
Yeah.
send me another bill. So they're making sure that they're getting their, pops at every employment opportunity that they can.
I'm sorry to be confused about this.
And so
Is that a one-time payment or is it an
it's annual. But we only get assessed, one amount for one teacher annually. But, usually when I get my first quarter billing, they've captured everybody that started at the beginning of the year, but we will have teachers come and go. So usually the subsequent bills for quarters 2, 3, and 4 are much smaller, depending upon,
It's an ongoing expense for each teacher. Yes.
yes.
Any other questions? I'm sure there are.
Go to the thousands of questions.
So before, why don't I pause there and we can look at the new things that I have in. So this would be jumping ahead to page 18 in your packet, which is the FTEs, kind of either by department or by position of everything that's in the budget before you. So administration, which is essentially the superintendent, assistant superintendent, the assistant superintendent at a 0.6, equity coordinator at a 0.6. Both of those 0.4s are coming out of federal funding to make them the 1.0. Our public information coordinator, interpreter, our receptionist, and the executive assistant to the superintendent are what's making up that 6.2 FTE in administration. Arlington and Sandgate transportation, they have 4 bus driver positions. My department is comprised of 5. Curriculum instruction and assessment is 3, which is the director, the administrative assistant, and then the tech integration specialist. We have 3 EL teachers. Human resources department has 5 FTEs. Facilities maintenance and operation is comprised of 3 people, but I have a 10th of one of those positions coming out of the food service fund. She doesn't. I could essentially probably put more FTE into food service because she does a great amount of work with food service. But at this point, it's only a 0.1. Student Services Administration, which is Dr. Abbott and her assistant here in the office. So that's the 2 that you're seeing there. And then our tech, either our senior systems administrators or our technicians. There are 11 FTEs there. And then in the next column over to the right, the early education programs, you can see the FTEs of paraprofessionals, teachers, special education teachers. SLP is a speech and language pathologist. SLPAs are speech and language pathologist assistants. Health and family engagement position, physical therapist, universal pre-K coach, which came about when Megan, the director of early education, decided not to backfill the assistant director, but instead put this coaching position in. And then there are 2 administrative supports in early ed. And then the bottom portion of that document is overall student services. So I have this broken down kind of by district, but also grade level. So Arlington and Sandgate are operating K-12 districts. So serving the students that are in the Arlington schools, you can see the counts of FTEs there. And that there have been reductions. I pulled out a paraprofessional to go into IDEA. We've also pulled out behaviorist to go into IDEA. The next column over, the K-5, K-6 is SVU ESD and the North Bennington. So we do have some students that are attending the public schools being served by employees of the SU from North Bennington. So we're allocating a portion of the FTEs per the IEPs to North Bennington. So most of which, though, however, are SVU ESD budget. So, and then corresponding over to grades 6 and or 7 to 12. The MAU is that third column there. And the one thing I realized this afternoon was that I missed the drivers that Kate had added last year. So we were allocating about 1.5 FTEs here to the K to 5, K to 6 entities. To
Class secondary.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay.
Clarify the drivers that,
They're not bus drivers. They are drivers that are actually, we're leasing vehicles. So they're transporting students that are, some of which like are on step placement. So they're only in school for a couple hours a day.
that isn't covered by the transportation, by the busing?
No.
Are the vans, cars, whatever it is, the lease, is that part of the transportation budget?
It's
No,
not part of the
two-
contracted service, but it's in the special education budget.
But in the total expenditures on transportation, are those vehicles in this line item, 2711?
Yes. Yes, when you look at it that way, but if you're looking at it on the category side, that's just the contract.
So is that the $137,000 increase from the actual of 24? Is that for these drivers and the purchase or rental of the vehicles?
It's gonna be the rental vehicles, it's going to be the drivers, it's going to be early ed transportation, it's gonna be special education transportation that's due for and or our employees, plus the drivers from Arlington and their busing and all of that together. So transportation has gotten complicated. Because when Arlington and Sandgate came in, they came in owning their own buses, having their own staff versus the contract here. So
Is that changing ever?
not for the,
That's not our decision. No.
I just know because we changed here, I just.
But the decision for the transportation using smaller vehicles was very cost effective to do it.
I was just gonna say that was we did better
Yes.
bringing it in-house.
there was a shift. I think the intent was to replace the out of district run. So we had, a bus going back and forth to whether it's to Rutland or Pittsfield. And that was gonna cost us like $189,000. Just, whether it was one student on it or 5, 6 students on the run. I think our internal driving situation is covering one of those runs, but they found it to be much more supportive of these step placements or students that are kind of in and out of Beach Street, Congress Street. Having the vehicle and the flexibility to be able to get those kids to and from at the times that works for them. And it's constantly evolving as those step placements expand or kids move in and out of various programmings.
So those drivers that's all they do is drive? And so do we hire them part-time, full-time?
They're hourly employees as needed.
Do they, I just am curious, you don't have to answer this, I'm curious about it.
So we've been doing this
Difficult.
about 2 years.
Yeah, I think it's like last fall it started.
Yeah. I think we approved it last year.
And we added, if I recall, we started out with a couple of vans and then we added.
We have 2.
So
We were gonna
started out with
expand,
one.
we're gonna expand to 3, but I kind of pulled back and said, hey, let's kind of look at this and make sure we need it, but we're just not.
Are we leasing these vehicles or?
It's
Leasing.
I had to sign my name
On the lease.
1,000 times
Well,
for the lease.
Oh,
Leases.
no, because it's an ongoing
Are
thing.
these typical leases or was mileage negotiated up front?
Those vehicles, I think are the ones that are doing more of the in-town, not the out-of-district, because we do have a couple of folks that actually are driving but volunteer to keep their own vehicle and they're getting paid
68 cents a mile.
57.
You volunteer for that too.
Mm-mm. But
Remember it was-
and cheap,
remember it was
cheap.
first 138,000. So,
Yeah.
So do they still have to do all the same things that a regular bus driver? Like random drug testing or
They
something? I don't know
don't
what
have to have the CDL because they're not considered buses. They are passenger vehicles and they are staying below the threshold of having enough or having, I think they can't have more than 7 passengers, period, in the vehicle. If they crossed over to 8, I think that's when it changes.
It's not unique. We do it all.
Oh, you do, I just, and then the random testing or
That's a whole
it's a policy, that's why.
association on transportation, agency on transportation. Yeah.
Okay, so that was staffing. And then the last thing I want to share is, I think Nicole, maybe you had asked, I don't know if it was last year, to maybe try to put the budget into 3 buckets and I couldn't do 3. So I got you to what, 10 maybe? So this is, again, last page, page 19 of the packet. So the local paraprofessionals, the budget of 24, our actual expense to 24, the difference, just so we can kind of see where the budgets landed for last year. So these local paraprofessionals are only in SVU ESD. That's where the bulk of them are. And then there is one at the middle school, Mount Anthony Middle School, and one at Mount Anthony High School. There were no requests to add additional paras for this year in that bucket. English learners, so those are our 3 FTEs for our teachers there. Last year, we overspent that budget by about 20%. Our pre-K programming, so that is the tuition plus the teachers that's not the part of special education of early ed, so just the pre-K. And I think we had seen previously that pre-K tuition, we were budgeting for potentially every seat that could have been. We pulled that back for this year's budget. And then Megan is actually pulling it back again for FY26. So this is just looking at what we budgeted for 24, what we actually spent. Hopefully we'll be dialing that in so it's closer and not leaving so much money on the table. But that basically offsets our assessments going forward, whatever surplus was there. Early essential education, the next line down, that is the special education portion of early ed. The special education costs of K to 12, so that's 17. We had $17 million budgeted, spent just over 15, so about 14% left there. Administration is kind of everything else apart from education, so mainly this office here. So the transportation base is our base contract with Due4. That gets our 16 buses, that gets kids to and from school. That's where we landed for FY24. The early education, you can see, was slightly overspent. Student services, so that's the special education K to 12. Had about 100,000 left there. And then the Arlington and Sandgate busing was slightly overspent. And that's how we ended FY24.
So we underspent the budget by $4 million. Am I reading that right?
3.8. just so you could kind of see like what's driving those, you know, where it's coming from. So then I'm looking at those same buckets, comparing the current year's budget to this first draft of the proposed budget. And this is kind of why I went through this a little bit quickly, because we're kind of seeing a trend in special education. I did a 3-year comparison and sent that out to all administrators of budgets to actuals. We keep budgeting for all of the positions that we have, but we continually have vacancies. We try to, if we can't fill the vacancies, oftentimes we're looking at contracted services. Contracted services tend to be more expensive, but it isn't always filling all the needs that we have. So a question that I wanted to pose to the board tonight for consideration, and I did talk to Dr. Abbott about this too, is if we look at the FY24 budget for student services, it was $17.5 million roughly. Oops. Okay, that doesn't want to work. We only spent just over 15. This year's budget, we are at 19, and then projecting for next year with what we know that's in the collective bargaining agreement and the health insurance, another, $2 million on top of that. So my question is, would the board want to gamble a little bit and pull back on what we're budgeting for positions and or benefits? Because that's really where I've seen that a lot of the breakage is in the salaries and benefits because of those vacancies and or folks come on board. I've budgeted a single plan and they don't take it, so that's $12,000 that sits there per person. So
In our discussions, we said, we want to bring this to the board to make you a partner in making this decision. That, as Renee said, it's a gamble. Now, if we go back and look, you're going to be left with surpluses, but watch it, the year that we don't build this in, could be the year that it could come back and bite us, but it's also an opportunity to reduce your budget without impacting any employee at this time.
It's Jeff here. When do we go back into teacher negotiations? That fiscal year 27?
say that again, Jeff. Sorry.
When we go back into teachers renegotiation? We just finished last
We will,
year.
yeah, we have one more year of the contract that begins July 1 of 25, which means you will open negotiations with teachers in the fall of 25.
And then it starts fall of 26, the new,
Yes, July 1 of 26 would be the start of a successor contract.
okay.
So Renee, I looked online for an enrollment number and I haven't been able to find where they're posted. So I'm curious to see what our enrollment numbers look like. Relatively, how many do you anticipate coming in? How many are leaving?
Well, as part of that NESDEC study that was done for the SVU there were enrollment projections in there. It unfortunately didn't include Arlington or Sandgate because it was just looking at the elementary district. But as part of that, they did actually kind of project out for Mount Anthony as well. So I did actually pull that out of that study and sent that to the SVU and Mount Anthony principals for them to look at because it definitely is a downward trajectory. But with that, you're seeing the level of need of the students that we have increasing. So overall numbers are going down, need is going up.
Well, as I'm looking at, it seems to be about a $10 million increase from the actual of 24. And that's that's significant, especially if the number of students is decreasing.
If we were to gamble, that $10 million, you may have said this in my head was in the numbers, that $10 million increase looks like,
It's been two, so like pretty consistently, it looks like we have a $2 million kind of fund balance that ends up in sped. So it was it was there in FY 23, there in 24. I'm really trying to drill it down heavier in the Mount Anthony side. A little over $1 million roughly annually. SVU ESD, about $1 million.
so we could gamble by as much as 2 million, or we could gamble by as much as, I mean, we're seeing a $4 million difference right now.
We don't know where we're gonna end this year. Like when I was looking,
Fair.
yeah, and again, we
Getting
still have
close.
folks that are coming, folks that are leaving. Does it look right now like it's gonna be the same? It does, but we're still pretty early in the year. I don't know how comfortable I would be pulling $2 million out of the budget. But that,
Maybe it wouldn't have to be you, Renee. Maybe people can go back and look at overall budgets where.
but it truly is the position. So that's why I wanted to give you the FTEs. So that's what's in there. It's just not every position remains filled all year long. We have multiple vacancies. So I think Kate was just about fully staffed, and I don't know how long it lasted, but I mean, you saw on the consent agenda tonight how many, resignations there are with only 2 coming back in. So with that, constant flux almost of positions coming, going.
Well, I know that when the temporary position was asked of us a month or so ago in early ed, at that time, I thought she had only felt it would be needed for this year, and yet it is listed to go forward.
She asked for it to be included for next year as well. Yes.
So back to the projections, where are we? And where?
That was a need, sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah, for this year is what she felt.
But I also think that it was due to the intensive need. It doesn't seem to be going away.
So of her.
Whether or not student count goes down, the intensive need is what's going up. So what that position aimed to solve is not part of what is shrinking from an overall headcount perspective.
Okay, so I'm feeling like then something should shrink. Maybe.
Well, that's going to be something that we have to reckon with.
Yeah.
There are a number of things that are being asked of this board and several and all of them across the state that are things you can't not do. You can't not fund. And it's going to put pressure on the traditional things that schools are supposed to be doing and funding.
Yes.
1201, special education,
Mhm.
budget 2025, current budget.
Mhm.
You listed as 16.2 on page 4, but on this page 19, 25 is shown as 19.1, 19.2.
Because it's not just 1201. It's going to include the mental health services. It's
Okay.
going to include psych.
I'm sure, I assumed there was a
Yeah.
good
So there's a
explanation.
lot more functions.
But is this $2 million more or less been consistent the last few years as surplus? And that's due to breakage, people not,
Mainly in
Positions
the
not
1201, meeting the 1201 salaries and benefits. I mean, some years there was some in sight. I'm seeing it like we were continually spending more on behavior supports than what we have budgeted, so.
Of course, that gets plowed into local budgets as surplus that reduces what they're paying.
Correct.
So this local budgets are what are the taxpayer sees. That's what hits them.
Right.
So it actually already goes back into reducing total expenditures. That's taxed. I just wanted to make that point because it's important.
You mean on the, Ray, you're talking about on a surplus, an end of year surplus?
Sorry, what? An
Are you
annual
talking about
surplus?
Yeah, the end of year surplus goes back into the
It
local
gets
districts.
distributed by Renee according to logical
Right.
ways of doing it back into local budgets as a reduction in their general state support grant that they're going to have to require from the state. So it's
The
already. Sorry, what?
I was going to say the difficulty though, okay, so that's great that the surplus goes back to the individual districts in their, as a credit back to them. But when the SU budget is consistently high or underspending what's approved, the local budgets are the ones that have to make up for that. If the SU budget goes up 10%, 12%, the local school boards are really being pushed then to take the cuts, even if at the end you're going to get a credit back. That's not what the taxpayers are approving. So I'm not comfortable with a $2 million underspending or over budgeting year after year, because at the local level, we've really been pushed to cut our budgets to try to compensate for the increases that are largely happening within the SU budget.
So this $2.5 million dollar figure here, the difference in the K-12, that money we tie back to the funds from which it was raised.
Right.
So North Bennington is separate from SVU, ESD is separate from Arlington, Sandgate, so on and so forth. So we break that out and that fund balance gets applied to the 26 budget that we're looking at right now as offsetting revenue.
Yep.
Before that goes into the local budget. So it's not like, the money is just sitting there. It does get applied along with our census block grant and any extraordinary reimbursements.
Yeah.
So that money comes from, so for FY26, that will come from the FY24 surplus.
Correct.
And it plows back in, it reduced, you get assessed on the FY26 budget a certain amount of money, which is higher than the previous budget, as we see here. At least it looks to be that at the moment. So you're getting money back from 24 to pay that, to help pay. What the question is whether we want to take the current account, which would be for FY26, and reduce the budget for that year directly. It's not, the rollover is there, we know that, but if we reduce the budget for 26, we make it tight, and there will be no roller over for FY28. Most likely.
That is the gamble.
That's the gamble. So you're really affecting 2 years down the road. And as I see it, but just based on the way the structure of the budget is. And so you really do have to weigh carefully whether you think you're going to have this sort of breakage. Obviously, you're not going to take all of it. Because, but we could certainly think about the 2 million figure that's been tossed about, or something in between. It seems clear that we ought to take some of it, but we've got to be cognizant that we're going to pay for it down the road.
Right. I mean, and it's only gonna take, a couple of students moving in that end up in a district
With
placement.
high levels of expenditure.
Right.
Back to salaries.
Mhm.
Is the special educator position that was vacant, it was never filled because we weren't able to fill it?
Correct.
Okay, so that money is now being moved to a associate director. Is that position already in place? So if that position is currently in place, do we have to transition that money, or is it where is that money?
This year, it's in the 1201, not in the 2490 function. So I'm correcting it in the 26 budget to put it in the correct place.
Eliminated the special ed position in the same,
So essentially, what I've been trying to do is from our legacy system that we had years ago, we had something called position control, which assigned a control code to every single position. So we don't have unexplained growth in our head count. I'm using all of those control codes and making sure that we're not over hiring. Unfortunately, the new system that we have with what the Agency of Education mandated years ago doesn't have that same functionality. So I'm tracking everything manually now. So without having to come and ask for a new position like Megan did last month, using a vacancy, repurposing it. And there's been a lot of that. Like this position was vacant, we need a behaviorist. So we're going to take that para, make them a behaviorist. Or that was a behaviorist position, we actually need to go back to a teacher. So just making sure that our head count's not growing without coming to the board and saying we need a new position. But with like this, if this budget passes and all the member district budgets pass, we would have 3 new RBTs. So those would be new control codes that I would create. And then Megan has hired for that one para position. So that's an existing one. The BCBAs are existing, but it would be a net increase of 3 for next year with what you have in front of you right now.
and in that same position that we approved just a short bit ago, next year she sees a decrease in the number of students coming into the pre-K area.
Head count wise, yes, but need is increasing. So the severity of the need or trauma or
Well, here's a question. Needs increasing, the budget goes up, but if we're unable to fill positions, we're not actually able to respond to the need completely appropriately.
right. And that's when we revert to contracting as much as we possibly can.
So it increases our contracting line, but we still may not meet all the need, I suppose.
We have multiple contracted service providers, whether they're remote or open.
A lot of those are in SLP, PT or OT. And some of that's funded by Medicaid, right? PT, OT.
Yes, physical therapies, heavy in IDEA and Medicaid.
So for us tonight, this was for us to get the initial numbers and familiarize ourselves.
Yes.
No action needed.
I'm hoping if it's okay with the board to maybe meet 2 weeks from tonight. But if you have any direction of what you would like to see in the next, again, I'm hopeful to have the first pass of the assessments for you.
I would
That's me too.
love to see a decrease on non-student related pieces. If you're asking.
That's the least of our problems, so. The money is in where it is in the salaries and benefits.
Well, I'm curious about the $40,000 in the equipment on the budget category where it was in 240,000. And then this year, 84,000. For the next 2 years, you've budgeted less than half.
It's really been more of a reallocation of the budget to be in alignment with our fixed asset policy. So, thinking of the chair that we're sitting in, you think of it as kind of a piece of equipment, right? But really the way that IRS looks at it, General Governmental Accounting Standards Board, equipment to essentially be registered as a fixed asset and depreciated has to have a single item value of at least $5,000. So we don't buy a lot of stuff that has, one thing. I mean, we have a couple of servers that get purchased every couple of years, which would hit that line. Those can be $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 a piece.
So in the past, more things went to that line.
Yeah, or if incorrectly charged.
Or charged to that one.
Yeah.
Or just correcting.
So sliding it out of the equipment and into the supply line.
So you have to take into account the decrease in the previous line.
Right.
I think if we commit to trying to use the surplus, then we all have to be cognizant of what we're doing to budgets 2 years down the road.
And if this, oops, I'm sorry.
Yep, go ahead.
No, if the surplus is 2 million, we have seen it be 2 million, but we feel most comfortable saying we should use 1 million of it. Does that make? And I mean, we're talking about $1 million in a $37 million budget.
Yeah, so what percentage is that?
Per town, it's a rounding error.
But
Yeah.
this is the huge difficulty for the other budgets following it, with it being 10% and $10 million of an increase. So I'm wondering, can we go back and look? When I say we, I don't mean me.
Yeah, and I
Could
would
it be looked at again?
step back on a $10 million increase, because are you like comparing the actual of FY? Yeah.
Yes.
But that's not what the budget was. In
It's the
24.
actual, what we actually spent in 24.
So it's kind of comparing apples to oranges, right? Because we're not saying we're increasing our budget $10 million. If we looked at, let's see here.
Well, we're saying that we actually spent 27 million and we're actually budgeting 37.7.
Comparing actual of 24 to the budget. Budget for 24 was 31.3 million.
31.4, yeah.
Closer to 31.4.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, 2 million is about 6%.
I mean, the reality too is that the contracts have been done.
Right.
And the benefits, we have no control over.
That, Yeah, that's totally out of our control. That's fine.
Both of those things are the largest two lines on
Yeah.
the budget. And they are what they are. There's nothing we can do about it.
The only line we have any control over is the first one, which is people workforce. And that requires just a kind of a sharp scalpel to figure out where to cut.
Especially when so many of the positions that we're talking about
Or not even
that
filled.
you have to, or A, not filled, or B, you have to have them.
You have to have them, right?
My approach, at least what I'm thinking of, is kind of going through and looking at starting with any of the positions that are vacant right now, what we have in the budget for projected possible benefit elections and pulling them back.
Yep.
See where that gets us. Again, and if it's a vacancy, pulling back where we have them on the pay scale, then maybe something lower on the pay scale. Again, just seeing where that.
Right, because that's an estimate of what it's cost us.
So if I kind of take the minimal approach to that and see
Yep.
where we land.
And that might give it, and because if you don't fill, within a group of positions, some of which are unfilled, if you need to increase another line, you can shift, right? But that's all dependent on the continuing shortage of people to fill these positions, vacancies.
It's difficult from, what I hear from my husband coming home from work, it's just being in schools is not, an easy job. So
No.
Shortage of teachers, educators, behaviorists everywhere. I mean, even though Kate wants to get more board certified behavior analysts, but there just aren't any. We need school psychologists. There just aren't any.
Okay, so Renee has asked for us to schedule a meeting for, it looks like your December 8th is your ideal?
2 weeks from tonight.
9th, I'm sorry. I was looking at the 9th and I said the 8th. The 9th.
Have a permit? Yeah, that's okay.
30? Yes.
So you're going to try to look for things that you can. Try and see
If
what
that-
kind of number you come up with.
If that's kind of what everybody's comfortable with. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly, I could take a pass at it, right? Can always put it back in.
Still gonna say that it's going to come back on us at 2 years down. the road.
One way or the other, right?
Which is why we should look at it right before
No,
we just.
it's just going to come back to us anyway.
You're saying if we use that 2 million, if we.
Because what I'm trying to get across to you is that the SVSU budget, that gross number is not entirely funded local. Some of it is funded from previous local shares. That's all I'm saying. If you diminish it, then there's a hit somewhere along the line where you're actually facing that a bit of a bolus.
And as true as that is, we are looking at expenditures. We're looking at the piece of spending, not on receiving.
Yeah, no, I mean, you need to make good decisions about what you're budgeting to spend. Yes, I agree with that.
That's true. I'd like to consider the money factor too, and that fiscal year 28 money costs us more, just by simple logic. It's gonna cost us more money than fiscal year 25 money.
Yeah.
that, you know, that place, it's just another thing that I'm absolutely not gonna sleep tonight thinking about.
So
Can you tell me where in the SU, well,
10% increase.
send me the enrollment, I'm just curious. You know, the average enrollment that's typically in a board package, it says will be posted on the website. Would you just send me where I should find that? Sure. Thanks.
I don't know if it's still regular part.
Usually in the packets,
It
isn't it?
hasn't been in the packet for a while because of the wildly inaccurate numbers that were on it.
We, hopefully I'll be seeing, you know, the first pass at long-term weighted ADM soon. But again, with that vacancy at the Agency of Education, I don't know how long it's gonna be for them to start sending that data down. It's not really gonna give you exactly what you're looking for because it's average daily membership and averaged and weighted and yeah, we should be able to pull, you know, what the enrollment is, or at least what, you know, our counts were during the census window.
Just gonna ask you, do you have our counts for that?
Tech.
Yeah.
Does, yeah. They have reviewed and confirmed and made sure that we're getting counting every student correctly.
Okay. So next meeting is on the books. We'll work with Amy to make sure that that's properly won. Item 6 on the agenda is gonna be very brief. We'll see you all again next Wednesday, the 4th, for the very first conversation, for the first conversation regarding superintendent.
I think that was the search today.
It was one today.
Yeah,
December 4th. The search for superintendent. I had a meeting with Vermont School Board Association and Nicole and Nick Galt on Friday, last Friday. The Friday, Nicole?
Yep.
I believe so. Feel really good about that conversation. Feel very good about the decisions that the board will have before it for shaping this process to be as we would like. And there will be a lot more information about what that can all look like when. Nicole, anything to add there?
No, I mean, I think the consultant that they've hired or that they've placed us with has a lot of great experience as a former superintendent. She also oversees those who are looking to develop their career in the path of being a superintendent. So she knows a lot of who the up and coming people are. And with 7 open positions for superintendent, I think having somebody who has a good sense not only of how to guide us in the process, but what the reality is of the pool that's out there and helping us when we have to make those big decisions. You know, it's not going to be easy. It's not like there are an abundance of candidates and just a few positions. It's quite the opposite.
E-bid situation.
It's 7 as of this moment. It's going to be more.
Two more.
16 or 20. So more to come with that. We'll get the process started. Last on the agenda is a motion to adjourn.
Make it.
Motion is made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Thanks.
Really don't.